I'm going to go to Aaron in one moment, but first I want to watch a second part of that video, which I think shows the paucity of ambition of the Labour front bench on this particular issue.
If we had that policy and a lot of private landlords went bust, I know there are lots of people, including lots of Labour members, who go, yippee, that's fine. They're evil, exploitative people, which is maybe well be true. But if they go bust, their tenants are going to be homeless.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to think about what would happen after that. Their housing that they owned would be bought up by probably even greedier landlords. And I think we also have to think about the fact that sometimes, whether we like it or not, people who've been on low pay, often for the last 10 years as a result of terrible Tory cuts, are topping up a very mediocre income with rent on a property that used to belong to their mother, who's maybe moved in with them and they're renting out their mom's house, and that is actually topping up their income.
I mean, it's such a stupid argument, because it's what you're doing. It's a really classic right-wing way of doing an argument, which is to say, if we changed this one thing and didn't change anything else, there'd be some bad policies, so we can't do this one thing, right? And also, no one really is suggesting in these plans that we're going to intentionally bankrupt a load of landlords. It's probably not particularly, it's not going to be particularly politically popular in the middle of a global pandemic. But if you were, so if you hypothesize that some landlords go bust, then the only thing that Thangam Debbonaire can possibly imagine you would do if landlords go bust is you'd sit back while worse landlords buy up the property. Now, we have a secular crisis of social housing in this country. And how could it not sort of, even pass your mind that maybe the state could buy up those houses when they're presumably going to be a bit cheaper at this point in time, and then rent them out at social rents? Like, that's not rocket science, is it? And also this idea that, some people do rely on their rental property to have some income if they're not getting well enough paid, is what she's saying there. Well, how about we build a welfare system where people don't need to own a second home to retire comfortably? And they want to take over the state. They can change more than one policy. I mean, I just find it so frustrating, Aaron.
The whole interview was ridiculous. She didn't know what starter homes are, which is obviously a very controversial policy. She said things like, oh, the left has to get with the program. Working class people want to own their own homes. No shit. I've been renting for, 16 years. I've lived in about 15 houses and flats. Yeah, thank you for telling me. By the way, your party, the previous leadership, promised to build 500,000 private homes in 5 years had it won the last general election. It's just almost mocking people with the exact same platitudes we heard 5 years ago. They were unpopular then, they're unpopular now. And she says, on the one hand, oh, well, this would cost us, £6-7 billion a month. And then immediately she says, and also we'd bankrupt landlords. It's going to be one or the other, right? Either you have a system where the state comes in and pays these rents. Nobody is suggesting that, like you say, Michael. And if they are suggesting it, it's for maybe several months. And they're not suggesting that. They're certainly not. Nobody is suggesting it for 2 years. I said on Monday, the fact that people are throwing up this straw man demonstrates how weak this policy is. And at the same time, the thing about, oh, well, if they go out of business, somebody worse will come along. A capitalist in a crisis like this, they look at things called distressed assets. And by the way, we could see, if this crisis then becomes a crisis of the mortgage market, if we see house values drop, I mean, they may not. The FT is saying right now that UK housing will fall by 5 to 15%. 5% is negligible, 15% is pretty significant. In that context, we should be talking about the state buying up distressed assets, i.e. houses which people are having to sell because all of a sudden the numbers don't add up anymore, or because renters are defaulting and people with buy-to-let mortgages are screwed. Yes, actually, the state should be stepping in and buying them because, like you say, we have a decades-long crisis of social housing. Labour, whether it's the centre, the right, the left, all accept there's a problem with regards to housing in this country. Surely the one time you would want to buy houses is when they're massively undervalued and distressed in a crisis. When would be a better time to do it? And I just found the whole thing exasperating. And then, okay, maybe 1 in 1,000 landlords is in the situations he's talking about. You don't base policy around the 0.01% of people. That's not how you build good policy. It's like, for instance, if I say to my dad, we need to transform the economy, we need socialism, he might say, well, this one guy who had no money is now a millionaire. and so everybody can do it. No, you don't build a social system. You don't legitimate a social system around this one person in 10,000. It's stupid. It's childlike. And what was most concerning is, well, I didn't really rate John Healey as her predecessor, sort of, you know, had the brief for housing, but he knew what he was talking about. And what is petrifying with Labour is that somebody is admitting they don't really know that much about the brief, is talking in platitudes, says, well, I don't have the civil service, I just have one researcher, I can't come up with real meaningful policy, in a context of a pandemic, in a context of the worst recession in 300 years. And many, many people, whether it's homeowners or whether it's people who are renting, being very unsure about their future. Why the hell would you elevate somebody into that position when they've got no familiarity with the brief at this moment? It's politically inastute, but also I think it's deeply unethical.